My name is Jason Carter, and until recently, I thought my life was predictable in the best way possible. My wife, Melissa, and I had been married for 10 years. We shared the kind of life people envy. A nice house in the suburbs, steady jobs, and a calendar full of family barbecues and weekend plans. But perfection has a way of hiding rot beneath its surface. Lately, something had shifted in Melissa. At first, I dismissed it as work stress. She was working late more often, her phone glued to her hand. She'd laugh at messages I couldn't see, then quickly lock the screen when I walked in. When I asked her about it, she'd wave me off. Relax, Jason. It's just work. You don't need to know everything. I tried to believe her. I wanted to believe her. But the little things piled up. New outfits, perfume I'd never smelled before, excuses that didn't quite add up. And then there was her distance. The way she'd turn away from me in bed, the spark between us fading into cold ashes. Still, I convinced myself it was a phase. Every marriage has rough patches, right? The day it all started to unravel, we were stuck in traffic on our way to a friend's house. Rain poured down, streaking the windshield, and the heater was on full blast to keep the chill at bay. Melissa sat scrolling through her phone, barely acknowledging my presence. I glanced in the rearview mirror and noticed a bag in the back seat. It was hers, one of those fancy ones she rarely used. "Hey," I said, breaking the silence. "I think you left your phone charger in that bag. Want me to grab it?" She didn't even look up. "I'll get it later. It's fine." But something about the way she said it made me pause. I reached back anyway, fumbling for the bag. That's when I saw them. Footprints. On the fogged-up rear window. Not just footprints, handprints too. Clear as day, pressed against the glass like ghosts of a secret I wasn't supposed to see. My heart sank, my breath catching in my throat. I stared at those prints, the rain outside blurring everything but the cold reality in front of me. I couldn't take my eyes off the hand and footprints on the fogged-up window. They were faint, but their message was unmistakable. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. These weren't random smudges, they told a story of someone else, a story that didn't include me. I cleared my throat, gripping the steering wheel tighter than I should have. "Melissa," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She glanced up from her phone, her expression blank. "What?" I pointed toward the back seat. "What's with the prints on the window?" Her eyes followed my hand, and for a split second, I saw something flash across her face. Panic? Guilt? It was gone almost as quickly as it appeared. She shrugged, leaning back in her seat. "Oh, that's probably from when I gave Samantha's kids a ride last week. They're always climbing all over the place." Her explanation was so casual, so dismissive, that for a moment I almost believed her. Almost. But something about the way she avoided looking at me, how quickly she went back to scrolling through her phone, set off alarms in my head. "Samantha's kids, huh?" I said, trying to sound neutral. "Yeah," she replied, her tone clipped. "Why are you making a big deal out of this?" I didn't answer. My gut told me she was lying, and I couldn't shake the image of those prints. I let the conversation drop, but my mind was anything but calm. That night, after Melissa went to bed, I couldn't sleep. The rain still pattered against the windows, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. I replayed the moment over and over, the unease gnawing at my thoughts like a relentless tide. I needed answers. The next morning, when Melissa left for work, I went out to the car. I sat in the driver's seat, staring at the handprints still faintly visible on the rear window. My heart pounded as I started going through the car. In the back seat, wedged between the seat cushions, I found a crumpled receipt. It was from a nearby motel, dated 2 weeks ago. My stomach turned as I stared at the receipt. I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was very, very wrong. I sat there in the car, gripping the motel receipt like it was a confession letter. The date burned into my mind 2 weeks ago. The same night Melissa had claimed she was working late on a last-minute project. My heart raced, and a deep knot of anger and disbelief twisted in my chest. I couldn't shake the image of those handprints on the window. Now, with the receipt in my hand, the dots started to connect in ways I didn't want to believe. That evening, I decided to keep things quiet. I needed more proof before I confronted her. Melissa came home around her usual time, acting like everything was perfectly normal. She kissed me on the cheek, said, "Hey, babe," and disappeared upstairs to change. I followed her, staying out of sight. As she went into the bathroom, I slipped into the bedroom and grabbed her phone from the nightstand. She always kept it locked, but I'd seen her enter the passcode before. My hands shook as I typed it in. It unlocked. Her messages were the first place I looked, scrolling through the threads with her coworkers and friends. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary at first, until I saw a contact saved as Jen from work. The most recent messages told me everything I needed to know. "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again. I'm thinking about you right now. Can't focus on anything else." I scrolled up, my blood boiling with every word. Photos, flirty texts, plans to meet at that same motel. When I heard the bathroom door open, I quickly put her phone back and left the room. My heart was pounding so loudly I could barely think straight. I had the proof I needed, but confronting her now would be too easy for her to spin into more lies. I needed to catch her in the act. I spent the next few days quietly piecing together Melissa's lies. I tracked her movements, paid closer attention to her stories, and even checked her calendar when she wasn't around. Every little inconsistency felt like another nail in the coffin of our marriage. Then, one Friday night, she dropped the bombshell that she'd be working late again. I played it cool, masking my anger with a smile. "Sure, take your time," I said, pretending to be the ever-supportive husband. As soon as she left, I grabbed my keys and followed her. She drove across town, her route suspiciously familiar. I hung back, keeping a safe distance as she pulled into the parking lot of the same motel where I'd found the receipt. My stomach churned as I parked a few spaces away and watched her get out of the car. Dressed to impress, she glanced around nervously before disappearing inside. My heart pounded as I sat there, grappling with what to do next. Part of me wanted to storm in, confront her and whoever she was meeting, but another part of me wanted to make this confrontation unforgettable. I pulled out my phone and snapped a few photos of her walking into the motel. Evidence. Cold, hard evidence. When she finally came home later that night, I was waiting for her in the living room. She walked in, her hair slightly disheveled, her face glowing in a way I hadn't seen in years. "Hey," she said casually, dropping her bag by the door. I didn't respond. I just stared at her, the motel receipt and photos sitting on the coffee table in front of me. She froze, her smile faltering. "What's this?" I leaned forward, my voice steady but cold. "Why don't you tell me?" She hesitated, her eyes darting to the evidence. Then she laughed, a forced, hollow sound. "Are you seriously spying on me now? That's so pathetic, Jason." I stood up, towering over her. "Pathetic? You've been sneaking around behind my back, lying to me, disrespecting me, and you have the nerve to call me pathetic?" Her expression hardened. "Maybe if you weren't so boring, I wouldn't have to look elsewhere." Her words were like a slap to the face, but I refused to let her see how much they hurt. "You've been caught, Melissa," I said, my voice unwavering. "There's no spinning this. You lied. You cheated. And now you're going to face the consequences." Melissa stood there, arms crossed, her expression shifting from defiance to annoyance. "Consequences?" she said, scoffing. "What are you going to do, Jason? Cry about it? Leave? Good luck with that." Her arrogance ignited something in me. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a complete lack of respect, a mockery of everything we'd built together. I wasn't going to let her walk all over me. "You think this is a game, don't you?" I said, my voice steady but filled with quiet rage. "You think you can cheat, lie, and humiliate me, and I'll just sit here and take it?" She rolled her eyes. "You're overreacting. It's not like I'm the only one who's unhappy." I laughed bitterly. "Unhappy? You don't fix a marriage by sneaking off to motels with strangers, Melissa. You destroy it. And you've done just that." That weekend, I put my plan into motion. I gathered every piece of evidence, photos, texts, receipts, and emailed them to her family and close friends. They deserved to know the truth about who she really was. The fallout was immediate. Her phone blew up with calls and messages, her carefully constructed image shattering as the truth spread. Her mother called me in tears, apologizing for Melissa's behavior. Her friends, who had once sung her praises, turned their backs on her. When Melissa realized what I'd done, she stormed into the house, her face red with anger. "How dare you?" she shouted. "You had no right to involve my family." I stood my ground. "You had no right to betray me. Actions have consequences, Melissa. Welcome to yours." Melissa's rage burned hot, but it didn't intimidate me. She paced the living room, throwing out insults like daggers, each one sharper than the last. "You're pathetic, Jason. You couldn't even hold your own wife's attention." No wonder I looked elsewhere. I let her words wash over me, refusing to engage. She wanted a fight, wanted me to react emotionally so she could twist the narrative. But I wasn't giving her the satisfaction. Finally, she stopped, glaring at me. "You think you've won, don't you? Ruining my reputation won't make you less of a loser." I took a deep breath, my voice calm but firm. "This isn't about winning, Melissa. This is about taking my life back. You made your choices. Now I'm making mine. The divorce." The next morning, I filed for divorce. I made it clear that I had all the evidence needed to secure a favorable outcome, and Melissa didn't have much room to argue. The process was quick but emotionally draining. Watching her sit across from me in the lawyer's office, still trying to shift the blame, was like staring at a stranger. The woman I had loved for a decade was gone, replaced by someone cold and self-serving. Moving on. When the divorce was finalized, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. The life I thought I had was over, but for the first time in months, I felt free. Melissa moved out shortly after, leaving behind a house filled with memories I no longer wanted. I donated her things, redecorated the space, and focused on rebuilding my life. Friends and family rallied around me, offering support and encouragement. Slowly, I began to heal. I started therapy, took up new hobbies, and reconnected with parts of myself I had neglected during our marriage. Lessons learned. Looking back, I realized that Melissa's betrayal wasn't just about her cheating. It was about a lack of respect and honesty. Relationships thrive on trust, and once that's broken, there's no going back. If I could offer advice to anyone facing a similar situation, it would be this: don't ignore the signs, and don't let fear keep you in a toxic relationship. You deserve someone who values and respects you. As for Melissa, last I heard, her lover moved on, leaving her to pick up the pieces of her shattered reputation. Karma has a way of catching up with people. Conclusion: the scars of betrayal run deep, but they also teach you resilience. I've learned to trust my instincts, value myself, and never settle for less than I deserve. This chapter of my life is over, and while it ended painfully, it paved the way for something better. The handprints on the window may have revealed the truth, but they also marked the beginning of my freedom.